Okay, everyone, we are here to learn about how to lay out our pattern pieces on our fabric so we can cut out our fabric properly in order to make our pajama pants. So the very first thing you need to do when you're beginning a sewing project is that you need to make a cut list. So I've made us a cut list for our pajama pants project. We are all doing view C, which is the long pants, and we know that we need a front and a back, and we need two of each. And now they need to be mirrored because we have a left side and a right side, and to make sure they fit properly, we need to have them be different. There is also pattern piece number 3, which is the fake drawstring or bow. We only need to cut one of those, but it is optional. Again, if you really have your heart set on that bow, go for it. If you want a bow but you're not sure you want it the same as the fabric, I can give you ribbon, or you can leave it off, which is what I generally do. Now, the instruction sheet that we worked with to create our plan had something called cutting layouts. And the cutting layout you use is going to depend on the size you are making and the size of the fabric you are using. On this one, you will notice that it has these words ST. So this is 45 inches. This is the narrow one, and that's the vast majority of our fabric, and it has this ST, which stands for size. Now, the top layout is for sizes 3, 4, and 5, 6. So those are very, very small children's sizes. The second one goes from size 7, 8 all the way to extra large. So this is the one the vast majority of us are going to use. Now, some of us have some wider fabric. If you're using the stars, the sunglasses, or the hipster glasses, your fabric is actually 60 inches wide. So in this pattern, it's not laid out all that differently. You just notice that it's a bit wider and the pieces can sit next to each other. What this also tells us is how to fold our fabric in order to cut out two pieces at once, of the same pieces at once, so that they're mirrored. So on the layout, it's got this F and this SL. The F stands for fold and the SL stands for selvage. So we're going to actually fold our fabric so our selvage edges line up. Now you're saying, Miss Bamford, what the heck is a selvage edge? Now a selvage edge is a factory finished edge on the fabric. And it can look one of two ways. So this is a factory finished edge that is the same as the fabric we're using. So this will be on one side. The other way it might look is it will be white and it'll have some writing written on it. So these are the factory finished edges. You can notice if you look carefully, they actually look different from the fabric itself. Now, why is that important? That's important because it represents the lengthwise threads in our weave. So this is just a scrap of fabric. When I pull on it along the length, there's not a lot of stretch to it. When I pull along on the crosswise, there's a little bit. And when I pull on the angle, there's a lot of stretch. So what this is for is to make sure our pants are cut the right way so the lengthwise threads are running up and down and not across. Because if they're running across, they're going to stretch out of shape over the course of the day. And we don't want that to happen. So what we're going to do is we are going to fold our fabric so it's along the lengthwise thread. So this is going to be our fabric for this demo, this lovely paper. And I know I need to go on a lengthwise fold so my selvages line up. So my selvage is here and my selvage is here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it in half so my selvages line up. So you can see that my selvages, I've labeled them, my selvages are over here and my fold is over here. Now I'm going to take my pattern pieces, my front and my back, because I have elected not to make the one with the little fake drawstring, and I'm going to lay this out so it looks exactly like the picture. So I'm going to put my front, or piece number 2, near this end, and then I'm going to take piece number 1, which is the back, and put it down here. So this is going to look exactly like the picture in the cutting layout. Now I have to make sure that these are lined up properly to go along the selvage, or so the lengthwise threads are running up and down. Now I could try and look for an individual line or yarn in the fabric, but that's not going to happen. It's not very practical. So instead, we're going to use this arrow that comes on the pattern pieces here and here, and it represents what's known as the grain line, or the direction of the threads in the fabric. So we want those arrows to be parallel along one of the along the grain line, or along the selvage, the lengthwise grain. So how I'm going to do this is I'm actually going to pin down one end of the arrow, and I can't actually pin very well on these little tiny pieces, so I'm just going to stick a pin in. It's like science class. So I'm going to stick a pin in one end, and then I'm going to take my tape measure, and I'm going to measure from that line to the edge. And it says that it is at 5.1. I started the 2 line because it's easier to read on this tape measure, but it's at 5.1 on the edge. So I'm going to go down to this end, and I'm going to make sure it's the same measurement. So you can see it's not right now. It's in between 5.1 and 5.2. So I'm just going to adjust my pattern piece until they are the same. And now it looks the same. And I'm going to pin down this end. And I'm going to do the same thing with my other piece. And I'm going to repeat the process. So go from the 2 again, and it doesn't have to be the same number as the one before. This one looks like it is 5.6, and I'm going to go down to the other end, and again I'm off, so I'm just going to shift this a bit. Oop, I shifted it a bit too far. I'm going the wrong way. Let's see where we're at here. That looks pretty good. And again, I'm going to pin it down. And what I would do next is I would then pin all the way around my pattern pieces. I would make sure that the corners are pinned down. And I would put my pins, if I wasn't working in mini scale, on about a hand width apart, so the width of my fingers apart, to ensure that it's nice and secure. Now I can't do it on here, but I'd like to remind you that you're supposed to pin parallel to the cut line, and you want it just inside of that, so that way your pattern's not flapping about as you go. So to save time, and so you don't have to watch me cut a bunch of pieces, because that's quite boring, I have already magically cut out our pattern pieces. So there's my back. And there's our front. Now you will notice on my pattern pieces we have these little triangles. In some patterns they actually notch out away from it. We have them here. Those are important because they tell us how we're going to line things up later. So what we need to do before we remove our tissue paper pattern from our pattern pieces, I'm just going to secure this in place here so I can do this, we're actually going to clip those out because they're going to tell us how to line things up later. So I'm going to use my little bitty pretend fabric scissors here, and I'm going to cut, 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 and now I can unpin my pattern pieces. So now on my front pieces I have this little flap of fabric here that's actually going to sit inside the seam allowance. So when I go to line these up later to sew the inseam, I just line up those notches and I know they fit together. You'll notice on the back piece, in the bum curve that we talked about last week, there's actually a double notch, and that is because double notches indicate the back. It can be a double or a triple notch, and instead of clipping all 3, we just clip the 2 outside pieces or legs just to make it a bigger notch than the single ones, right? So if I tried to line these up together, I can see that the notches aren't the same size. And you'll notice, remember we talked about lining up the inseam? I'm going to sew it like this for my first piece. Notice the curves don't line up because bum, no bum. So I hope that answers all of your questions for lining up your fabric and cutting it out and laying out your pattern pieces.